You might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so. But you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking Fulvia. We're talking We Are Safe and All Is Well in Our World. And we're talking Julianne fucking Moore. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And, Joe, I've seen you rap things. No, I know. No, okay. It'll make more sense when we talk about it. But there's literally a line where this woman's like, oh my God, like, you rap that yourself? No, I've seen you rap things. It's the funniest fucking thing I've heard all week.
Oh my God, it's so middle-class white suburbia. I died of cringe, Trace. This is my ghost talking.
God, yeah. All right, everyone, we are discussing Todd Haynes' Safe. And I'm actually curious to see how many people have heard of this movie before, because I know it's more of an indie pick from the mid-90s. But again, when you see, like, I mean, as you said, Julianne fucking Moore, this movie is awesome.
Yeah. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Also, we're not talking about the 2012 like heist movie of the same name, so hopefully you all watched the right one.
Well, also, I'm probably going to call Todd Haynes Todd Solondz many times in this episode, so please forgive me and just keep correcting me.
Oh, God.
But why don't we bring in our guest so we can help pick apart this, this movie, man.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, he is a film professor at UC Denver who was featured in the queer horror documentary Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. He's also the author of the book The Revolting Child in Horror Cinema, Youth Rebellion, and Queer Spectatorship. You may also remember him from our previous episodes on cruising and female trouble. Please welcome back Andrew Scahilll.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. And these are not the couches I ordered. Black.
That would have been a better pick, actually.
It's definitely a more memorable line. Yeah.
My couches are literally trying to kill me.
This is my first time seeing this movie, so I wasn't quickly attuned to the iconic quotes from Safe.
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, I don't know how well known this film is. The people who know it tend to love it. But it's interesting, Andy. The reason we programmed this in part is because when you came on cruising 2 years ago, you were like, if you ever do Safe, you have to bring me back. And so lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those films that I don't get to talk about very much. I think if people know this film, then maybe they like Julianne Moore and they kind of backtracked her filmography and thought, what the hell is this? But it is a really fascinating film. It seems like a film that's made today in many ways.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how often should I use the word prescient in this recording?
Oh, man. Like, well, it's interesting. This film has been on my watch list for over a decade because I actually heard about this and read about this film in film school, but it wasn't one of the films that was on our screening list. So I got to read about it without ever having to see it. And I just never made that leap until this week. And I'm really happy that, once again, the podcast provides a reason for me to cross something off my watch list.
Yeah, I was actually worried that you might not like this movie. This movie is so slow and sad, and I'm not suggesting that you don't like those movies or you haven't liked those movies in the past, but typically this is not what I would call a Trace film. This is what I would call an Ari film.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because I wanted him to watch this with me, but I did not. Andy, Ari's my husband. But he didn't get to watch it, so I'm going to make him watch it soon. So I'll just watch it again because, you know, it's a real feel-good movie. But I am familiar with Todd Haynes' work. What's really funny is, even though I had to read about Safe in film school, two of Todd Haynes' films were on our screening list. And one, of course, was Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story.
Of course.
And the other one was I'm Not There.
Oh, interesting.
Oh. I got to watch Far From Heaven. Yay!
My introduction to Todd Haynes was through Poison, actually.
Okay.
I saw that after the fact. Like that was something where, like, when I was like right out of school, I was like, let me go through some stuff because I loved Far From Heaven. I do not love I'm Not There, but I also don't give a shit about Bob Dylan. So that's very much a case of like, this is not for me, as opposed to me saying this is a bad movie.
Right.
But yeah, Poison, I definitely sought out. Talk about art house though.
Yeah. If you guys ever want to do Poison, call me back. Because that's definitely a horror film in segments.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of these, well, I mean, what is Haynes calls them like women living in houses movies, but a lot of these types of films that he does do have like horror elements to them. And, you know, when I was watching this, I posted on Twitter, I was like, hey, Wes Craven called Safe the scariest movie of 1995. And
boy.
I know going into this, this is not a traditional scary, like in the horror movie sense, like it's a very different kind of scary, but I am tempted to agree with Mr. Craven on that front.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I have a feeling we are going to get a bunch of comments, mostly on like the bloody post or something. That'll be A, this isn't a queer movie, and B, this isn't a horror movie. No. And I would disagree on both.
Yeah. It's actually funny though, because, and we'll talk about this when we get to the reception, but like the queer community had some backlash against this movie when it came out.
Oh, gosh, I wasn't aware of that actually.
Well, I'm curious, Andy, I mean, you said you wanted to pick this, so what is your connection to the film?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I just wrapped, or I'm in the process of wrapping a class on queer literature and film, and we taught Carol as my Todd Solondz. Yeah, I did it. I said Todd Solondz. Todd Haynes film. You've inceptioned me, and I'm going to do it the whole rest of the podcast now. Now, I think this one, for how sterile it felt, how unresolved it felt, how little I knew about this character that I just spent 2 hours with. And in normal ways that would kind of repel me, or that would signify bad directing. But I know that it's doing something about the era and something about the place of woman in the 1980s. And so it's a film that's fascinated me. And I don't know that I have my head around it completely, but that's what this podcast is great for.
Right. Yeah. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk about, I mean, everything in this film, because I didn't find it as, I guess, abstract or not complex. I was gonna say confusing, I guess, as maybe I was expecting it to be. Like, you're right, it is very ambiguous, but it's not. It's a very linear plot. Although I would argue that like the first hour and the second hour do feel like two almost different films, but still together. Yeah,
because the location changes so much, and so much of the beginning of the film was about that, like, I call it like oppressive symmetry, you know, the way that everything felt so stilted and antiseptic, and then you get to this other space, and I think this is where I go back and forth on how this film feels about its new agey center, you know,
right?
That's the thing I'm still kind of rolling around in my head.
Well, and that is the thing, though. Is like, do y'all think the film takes a stance on it?
I almost don't. I feel like, if anything, Haynes is in support of Carol. That's the Julianne Moore character. But like, I do think that the film sides with her in believing that she is suffering from something, but I do think that you're meant to find that she's only moved from one bad place to another bad place.
That's the part I'm interested in. I'm curious how much other people feel like it is critiquing this supposed, you know, space of safety for her that, you know, that she finds. And on a kind of watching this week, I've thought, oh gosh, it's a lot more critical than I thought when I saw it in film school, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe. I mean, I like what you said earlier, Andy, where you said it was like sterile. And so to me, it's almost more of like an observational approach to this whole thing. Like, you know, what if you were a person that had this? And of course, Carol is our blank slate. Sometimes, like, just completely, like, we don't know much about her. She has no.
Her last name is White.
Oh, I know. But it's a thing where it's like, and again, with this reception, people were like, well, are you condemning it? Are we supposed to be happy that she's there? And it's like, I don't know if we're supposed to be anything. Like, this just is the choice she made, and the film is just showing you. It's very scientific.
Yeah, I feel like it's less about what the film, like, I don't know that there's so much of an agenda in terms of the way the character arc goes or the narrative goes, but I definitely feel like we as a viewer are meant to feel something about Carol's situation at the end.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And, you know, I think even though it's an observational style, that's not devoid of, you know, politics either. The way that it encloses her in space, the way that it fixates on this figure in the, you know, full body suit in an almost horror film kind of way. I mean, those are choices that he's making, and that's where I'm kind of reading, I guess, the ideology of it.
Well, I will say that. I mean, as soon as I finished watching this the first time, because I actually watched it again today with Solondz. Oh my god!
God, just start over.
I watched it again today with commentary, and it was Todd Haynes and Julianne Moore and one of the producers. But like, as soon as I finished it the first time, I messaged Joe and I was like, that was heartbreaking. Like, I felt so devastated for this poor woman who doesn't have an easy way out of anything. And Joe, I think you're right. She's gone from one toxic situation to another one. However, while I'm not like happy for her by the end of this movie completely, I'm happy that she is at least surrounded by people who are validating her.
Right. I mean, I do love that the husband is played by Xander Berkeley.
Yeah.
Basically just cementing his status as shit husband / dude.
Well, okay. So before we go into the film itself, let's talk about how this thing got made. Because I really didn't know about environmental illnesses. So I knew going into this, she was going to have a disease. No one knew what it was. And it was like, detrimental to her body. So I was actually expecting a little bit more body-ish type things, which I guess is my body horror like coming out. But like it's enough. And it wasn't a disappointment for me. But I just like didn't know how based in reality this thing was.
Did either of you, have you watched the trailer to this?
Yes, and it makes it look like a
pathogen thriller, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think everyone went in and then had those expectations subverted, or that Todd Haynes wanted you to go into this expecting something like that, and then to deliver you this instead.
Yeah, it was so funny when I was trying to explain this to my husband. He was like, "Oh, is it a bug situation?" He referring to William Friedkin's Bug, and I would argue it's not exactly the same, because that movie is very much marketing a killer bug parasite movie when it is very much about paranoid schizophrenia. Whereas at least the trailer for this is accurate to an extent, except it's just not really the thrill ride that trailer's promising you.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this film teases you, like, this is the explanation, right? And when she kind of goes, and then you realize that the ideology of this group is all fucked up, and that's kind of Calvinist and weird. So it's like you ultimately leave with no real resolution.
No explanation, no resolution. And then hope you feel good.
But, okay, so Haynes first heard about environmental illness in 1991 on a TV magazine program that referred to it as 20th century disease. And so he and producer Christine Vachon, and she's the one that she has her own interview in the Criterion Blu-ray. She's on this commentary. And she's, I think, worked with him on many of his films, at least through I'm Not There. But they interviewed organizations that advocate for people who have environmental illnesses, such as Response Team for the Chemically Injured in Atascadero, California, and the Chemical Connection in Wimberley, Texas. And in fact, the monologue that Carol gives during her birthday party scene was based on transcripts of one of the interviews from Wimberley.
Oh, wow. Huh. That's interesting, because that gets referenced quite a bit in various readings of this movie.
Haynes also did research, unsurprisingly, into New Age healing practices and was especially interested in the work of Louise Hay. So this was my first time hearing about Louise Hay. She was a big voice in the New Age movement. Her first book was Heal Your Body, The Mental Causes for Physical Illness and the Metaphysical Way to Overcome Them. And she eventually released a book in the 80s called You Can Heal Your Life, which was a huge bestseller, got her on Oprah, all this other shit. But just a quick primer on this woman. So she described how in 1977 or 78, she was diagnosed with, quote unquote, incurable cervical cancer, and how she came to the conclusion that by holding on to her resentment for her childhood abuse and rape, she had contributed to its onset. She reported how she had refused conventional medical treatment and began a regime of forgiveness, coupled with therapy, nutrition, reflexology, and occasional colonic enemas.
Oh. One of these things is not like the other.
I think maybe there's a thing where it's like stress like causes constipation, which therefore like exacerbates other health problems. I don't know.
Well, and also I think it's a cleaning out of the body, right?
Yes, very much so. So she claimed in the interview that she rid herself of the cancer by this method, but while swearing to its truth, admitted that she had outlived every doctor who could confirm its story.
I killed them. They're in my trunk.
Right. Exactly.
Around the same time, so again, we're in the 80s now, she had begun leading support groups for people living with HIV and AIDS, which she called Hay Rides, which immediately I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's okay. These grew from people in her living room to hundreds of men in a large hall in West Hollywood, California. Her work with AIDS patients drew fame, but basically she was telling them that self-love would heal their illness. And that led to her book, The AIDS Book, creating a positive approach.
Sweet Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. It's like she's still like her books are still read today and people swear by them, but it's a thing where like I'm reading specifically about this AIDS book and I'm like, no. I don't
I mean, it gets dangerously close to when she says that you may be exposed to AIDS, but only if you don't love yourself will you get AIDS.
Oh, well, boy.
But that's the thing. I mean, we'll talk about this with this goddamn Renwood place. But it's like, yeah, sure. Like, you're offering a solution, but it's also like so self-blaming and like it's put so much on self-hatred. And it's like, I don't know. Again, that ties into the queer experience more so than anything in this film for me.
Which is for me, the overlay of this film is that even though it doesn't have any, it doesn't about a queer storyline, it's very much a queer film.
Right.
And in case people didn't know, Todd Haynes is queer, and he was part of the ACT UP movement.
Yeah.
Yes, and that his queerness will actually play a part into why he cast, why he made the character, the cult leader of Renwood, a queer man as well.
Right. Even though we don't say the word queer or gay in this movie.
No, and I think we only say it's either AIDS or HIV once when they're describing him.
Yeah, I think it's Claire who says like he has AIDS and also like environmental sensitivity. And you're like, oh, are those two things comparable? You're saying them in the same sentence.
But that retreat was inspired by a yoga retreat at the Kripalu Center. And so, he also got inspiration from 2001: A Space Odyssey and unsurprisingly, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble.
Right, yeah.
For the script, Haynes has said that the conceptual origin involves setting up barriers that prevent the audience from getting emotionally close to the character of Carol. He used political red herrings to make the audience trust certain characters at first, such as the leader of Renwood being a gay man. Since Haynes himself is gay, he thought the audience would expect the gay character to be trustworthy. And then, adding to that too, cinematographer Alex Nepomniachtchi, he suggested the look of Red Desert to Haynes after reading the script, and together they decided never to let the camera get very close to any of the characters as a way to keep emotional distance, and, of course, emphasizing Carol's alienation by stranding her in cavernous interiors and on the margins of wide shots. And Joe, this is something we were talking about too recently in our Patreon episode on Bones and All, where I said, I had trouble connecting emotion to the characters because of how it was filmed in this kind of like distant way. But I would argue that in that case, it's less successful for me personally, because you're supposed to feel something for those characters and feel connected to them. Whereas I don't think that's the point here, or the purpose here.
Yeah, I would argue that it's very much the intention here that you don't connect emotionally with characters, even though you are desperately striving for that connection, particularly with Carol.
I think too, I mean, Carol doesn't know herself, right?
No.
Like she has, and I think that's what comes through, because Julianne Moore does a lot with just facial expressions in this film. The scene where she has a panic attack, it feels real. So I agree that it's part of the problem is that she has so little self-knowledge herself.
Yeah, she's such a, I want to say a pitiful character, but I feel like that's such a bad, like it has such a negative connotation attached to it. But I wanted to like give her a hug for this entire movie.
Oh, sure.
It's part of what Moore does with her voice, right? Because at first I was kind of like, well, is that just how she sounded back then? And I'm just misremembering. No. She's very much I think in the interview on the Criterion set, she's like, you don't put any weight on your larynx, and so you talk like this.
Which is so interesting.
So
I know. I never thought about that, but that is absolutely there in her breath. It's that breathiness in her voice. That unwillingness to step forward and be heard.
Yeah, and it's frustrating to watch, but it's
absolutely.
like, but I also have such empathy for this character that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
Well, and then it becomes such a force when there's that one scene where the doctor wants to do a different kind of treatment than she's comfortable with. Like she notices that there's a person spraying near the door where she's being treated. And it's the only time in the film she actually raises her voice, and it stands out as a result, because so much of the time you're just like, girl, you're so timid. It feels like you're gonna, like a child could bowl you over.
And credit to Julianne Moore. I mean, this could easily have gone kind of Stepfordy.
Yes.
And it doesn't at all. You see the kind of pain behind her eyes. It's really a fantastic performance.
Yeah, agreed. Potential investors wanted Todd Haynes to replicate the elements that had worked so well in his previous film, Poison, as we've already mentioned. But since this film was different in so many ways, and also the fact that it's a singular story, it took a long time to find the funding for it. So they ended up with a budget of about $1 million, and they began filming on January 1st, 1994 in LA, and filming lasted for about 6 weeks. So it eventually has its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival on January 25th, 1995, and there were reports of people walking out of the theater, supposedly because they didn't understand the movie. Apparently, many critics at the premiere were mixed about the film, despite the fact that by the end of the 90s, many had come around to it and placed the film among the decade's best. Apparently, the big film at Sundance that year was Harmony Korine's Kids, which took a lot of the buzz and word of mouth away from Safe.
It's a very different kind of like new queer cinema.
Very much. Sony Pictures Classics acquired distribution rights to the film and released it in a limited release on June 23rd of 1995. It made very little money. We're looking at about it made like $500,000 basically. So I think this is definitely one where, I mean, I don't even know if it made any money, period, because it wouldn't have been a home video hit.
No.
But on Rotten Tomatoes, we're looking at 87% with an average rating of 7.4 out of 10. Metacritic's got a 76 out of 100, and Letterboxd users have awarded it an 8 out of 10.
Nice. Okay, there we go.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, people love this movie now, and honestly, I think some people still consider it Haynes' best film. Again, mileage may vary. I am very partial to Far From Heaven.
Yeah, it's only my favorite film of 2002.
And isn't it interesting to you that Far From Heaven is so much about the melodrama and the emotion, and this is so emotionless,
the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
I find that
almost
fascinating.
dealing with the same thing, right? Like the oppressive weight of what it means to be a woman living in suburbia.
Right.
Well, and so that's the thing. So, okay. This is actually from the Criterion essay that comes with the disc. So it's called Nowhere to Hide by Dennis Lim. And what he writes is, he goes, there are two types of films we have come to associate with Haynes. Essayistic anti-biopics of pop icons and cerebral riffs on the melodramatic genre that Hollywood used to call women's pictures, and he himself has termed stories about women in houses. So for the former, you've got Superstar the Karen Carpenter story, Velvet Goldmine, which is kind of about David Bowie, and I'm Not There, which is Bob Dylan. But in the latter, you've got Far From Heaven, this, and the 2011 Kate Winslet miniseries Mildred Pierce.
And I would put Carol in there too. That probably came out before Carol was released.
Well, he didn't write Carol, so I'm wondering if that's maybe why they're there. I mean, he did, yeah. And so I think the last thing he wrote was I'm Not There. He might have written some of Mildred Pierce. I could be wrong.
It's so weird though, because that's probably the deciding factor, but also Carol feels like such a Todd Haynes film. Like, it's so inseparable from the rest of these female-fronted films.
Yeah. But all of his films revolve around the mysteries and traps of identity, calling attention to the social and cultural processes through which it is constructed. Elusive by design, the typical Haynes protagonist is a blank slate, a vessel for meaning. Sometimes this means shapeshifting a trickster figure, as with his Dylan and Bowie surrogates, and sometimes, as in the case of Safe, it means a person who seems barely to exist. And coming back around then to some of the reception for this. So, and I know you said you didn't realize that there was some queer backlash to this. So this is producer Christine Vachon. She says in an interview, she goes, there were attacks from the queer community on both sides of this. So people were really mad that you were telling a story that is not really about AIDS, but is very much about AIDS.
About AIDS, yeah.
And it is about a white woman, and there's not a queer character in the film.
Right.
So their reasoning for that is they said, well, we didn't want to, we wanted to give the queer community a break since they were dealing with this on a daily basis in their actual lives. So we didn't want to do that. But then there's a notion of positive images. And so she talks about how she made a film called Swoon with Todd Kalin that came under a lot of heat for depicting a gay serial killer. And the idea was that when our community is under such an attack anyway, and Joe, this is calling back to mind our Basic Instinct episode, how dare you represent us, the queer community, on the screen in a way that isn't absolutely positive? And to this, Vachon says, the answer to that question is, well, what the fuck is positive?
Right.
And how it changes over time.
Right.
And it does, but it's also, I think, and look, we were, as a community, we're in a very different space politically in 1995 than we are in 2023.
Oh, sure.
So I get that it's, contentious, but looking at these two different reactions, it's like, well, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yeah. People are mad because you don't make this queer, but then people are mad because you do something queer that's about AIDS. So I don't know what you want him to do. Anyway, but yeah, so that's kind of all I have for production, because I think, again, most of this is going to be going into analyzing and picking apart every detail of this plot.
Yeah, because it is exquisitely made.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we open from the point of view of someone driving a car through suburban streets at night, and we see that we are setting this film in the San Fernando Valley. It is 1987. I'm curious, Andy, I don't know if this year is distinctively important. I feel like this is sort of mid-range of the AIDS crisis. Am I right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I'm going to tell y'all, you're going to hate me. On my first viewing, I missed the subtitle saying it was 1987. So I didn't catch that till I watched it the second time, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, because I feel like because I'll confess, I've seen this film once before and I didn't catch it either. So I definitely thought that this was set in 1995. And then I didn't understand why people were like, oh, this is totally like about AIDS.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're introduced to Carol White, who is played by Julianne Moore, and I love that our introduction to this character is that she is having dispassionate sex with her husband, Greg, who is played by Xander Berkeley, and we are in the middle of cookie-cutter suburbia, so they have clearly sort of just moved into their house, like we're still buying furniture and arranging pieces, but they also have like neighboring houses that are still under construction, and they haven't put in the landscaping.
The score for this movie is so interesting because it's very synthy, but the score, I mean, over the opening credits, we're just on the POV of a driver going down this suburban street, but the score almost sounds like it's out of a science fiction film.
Well, I won't lie. The visual aesthetic of this, we've said it's very sterile. It's a little bit desolate depending on which half of the film you're in. This, to me, is giving strong early David Cronenberg vibes, a la Brood, but then also later David Lynch vibes, a la Mulholland Drive.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I also just have both filmmakers on the brain, so... But so we get a sense of what Carol's daily life is like. She goes to jazzercise class, and we learn that she doesn't sweat, and all the other women are very jealous of her.
Okay, but what is that, by the way? Is it just supposed to be like she's perfect?
I think we're meant to believe that it's like, oh, look at her. She is the pinnacle of health. She's aspirational for these other women.
Yeah, I agree.
I would argue that not sweating is not healthy, but
it's not healthy. You need to sweat. It's part of what your body does to regulate temperature. She also gets perfunctory calls from her mother, and I was just like, oh boy, this is we do not have a close relationship. We will never meet this woman. No. But I love that we're only hearing the one side, and you're just like, oh, I don't think this is not a great mother-daughter combo.
And we're already getting these wide shots. I mean, this house is cavernous.
Oh, it's
and
massive.
She is just alone. Oh, I was going to say, is your house porn meter going off, Joe?
I mean, it would be, except that I'm just like, it might as well be a museum. Like, I'm surprised that we don't have plastic wrap on the furniture.
And there's so many sort of natural things remade in ceramic or plastic, you know? And so that seems to be part of that aesthetic, too. It feels dead in a lot of ways.
My thing was very much, I was just like, why is there not a TV in the living room? And I was like, oh, right, because back in the day, the living room was just for that, for living and talking and conversing.
It was for entertaining, Trace.
God.
Yes. And her other responsibility, because she is a homemaker.
Not a housewife.
She's not a housewife. She's a homemaker. But she is supervising things like the kitchen renos, as well as, yes, making sure that new furniture is up to spec.
I mean, it's interesting. There are other directors that use this sort of like deeply symmetrical design. I think of like Wes Anderson, but there's something about this that isn't quaint or adorable the way
it's not cute.
It's not dollhousey. It's something else. I mean, it's just sort of boxy and not meant to be lived in.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could smell the doctor's office waiting room as I watched all these scenes.
Yeah, there's actually like a kind of ode to formaldehyde coursing over this entire, especially the first half of the film.
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean when I say dead. It's like dead but preserved, you know?
Yes, yes.
You know what film this also looks like at times is oddly Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, yeah. The cookie cutterness of it.
Absolutely. And he has, people have decor in their house that looks like a tree, but it's made out of plastic, and they're stapling the snow onto their roofs, kind of artificial reproduction of the natural.
Right.
I'm a sucker for movies that are like, I mean, this movie isn't really, well, it is a little bit satirizing suburbia, but like, I'm a sucker for that type of genre in film. I love that kind of shit. I mean, you've already mentioned Stepford Wives, but I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the difference here is that it's not going for the kind of gut punch where you laugh and then feel bad about it. This is very much a, hey, do you live here? You might be in danger.
Right.
So Carol goes for lunch with her friend Linda, who is played by Susan Norman.
So this woman was supposed to actually, Haynes wanted her to be Carol because she was in Poison. And it wasn't until someone sent him Julianne Moore that he was like, oh shit, it's her.
Oh shit. Sorry, Susan, we're going to have to downgrade you to best friend status. I will admit I misconstrued this scene when I was watching it, and it was only when I read a think piece about the film that I realized that, I thought that she was having an affair with somebody, and he, like, dropped her and wasn't returning her calls, and then it's like, oh no, she's now talking about her brother who has died from AIDS, we're just not saying it.
He's a bachelor.
Yeah, this movie, I am proud to say that I did pick up on that on my first viewing of this, but because I wrote the lines down specifically, because it's like, because it was when she just that's what everyone keeps saying, and that's what got it. Because if he was openly gay, the first thing people are going to say is, "Did he die of AIDS?" And so,
100%.
But I admire and a little bit surprised by the fact that we don't even say it in this word. You have to be an attentive viewer and like read between the lines of this scene, and to pick that up because it does not make it explicit.
Nope. And it's true to these characters, too, right? They would use the euphemisms to talk about their brothers.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and even this is so, I don't want to say dispassionate, but kind of removed. Like, she's clearly, like, she's feeling something, but she's not hysterical. She's not emotional. She's not crying. And then it's immediately followed by, oh, yeah, like, I think I'm going to have to sue my contractor.
Well, but that's the thing is, I mean, this is supposed to be her best friend, supposedly, in this film.
Right.
And there's nothing. There's no
connection.
There's no connection whatsoever.
Not like, oh, wow, like Julianne Moore's really bad at connecting with this other actress. It's like, no, do these women even know each other? Or do they just have a standing lunch date? Like, they don't know anything about each other.
Well, I mean, I would argue that Linda does not really give a shit about anything going on really in Carol's life, as we will start to see as it becomes an inconvenience to her. Mm-hmm. But there's something just about like this, the mundanity. Is that a word? Mundanity?
Mundacity?
Sure, I'm just about the mundane aspects of their life, and it's like so much of this. Like, I didn't find this movie boring at all because I was just kind of fascinated by everything that was happening. Even though, Joe, as you said, this is a slower film that doesn't really have a ton going on in terms of like action and plot, but I just found all of this so fascinating because it's like, God, her life sucks.
Well, every little detail feels important, right? Like, I was trying to cull down my notes because, as always, I took too many. And it was like, okay, well, we're not talking about the movie for 4 hours. Let's try to come in under 2. But I found that I fixated a lot on things like the radio announcements or the TV infomercials that she was hearing because the film loads a lot of interesting background about not just what's happening around Carol, but also things that appear to be commenting on her depreciating health over the course of the film. So, like, the next day she has this fall at home while she's trying to retrieve her telephone book, and she just sits there, and we hold on her for a long take. This movie is basically Long Take, the movie. And there's chaos with the renos in the kitchen, but the radio is very casually having this debate about euthanasia. And I'm like, okay, so we're talking about death, we're talking about dying, and we're also doing like a process of rebirth with the kitchen. Like, we're going through something to become something different at the end.
You know what? Also, though, my issue with this movie is it has a real vendetta against milk because
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I mean, she is a milkaholic.
So is Trace.
So am I. It was so funny because I caught her drinking milk the first time. Because in the scene with Linda, I was like, oh, that's interesting. She's drinking milk instead of whatever the fuck Linda's drinking. That's a very interesting choice.
Yep.
And then she asks for milk later from Fulvia. And then it's like, oh, she's allergic to fucking milk. And milk is really bad for everything. I'm like, I know, I just want to drink it in peace.
But if I was teaching this film, this is where I would stop and talk and like ask my students about like why milk? Why is this the beverage that she's, that is toxic to her? What's it doing for the story? I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I think that she is as allergic to whatever toxins are in the air as she is allergic to heteronormativity. I think she doesn't have children of her own. To marry this man, she had to become a mother. She had to take on his kid, and so the way that her house and her status seems like those are sort of toxic to her and her sense of self. So I think there's something to that. It's motherhood that is part of her, part of what her body's rejecting. Suburban housewifeness that her body is rejecting.
It's a housemaker, Andy.
Yeah,
Jesus.
sorry.
Housemakerness. No, but I think it's really important too that it's a stepchild and not her blood child because it's
100%. So important.
And I don't mean to insinuate that obviously, like, if you're a stepchild, you're not a real like child, like because you're not a blood relative. But I think for the sake of this film, it's making a commentary on the fact that like she has inherited or come into this life. It is not quote unquote natural to write. Also, Trace, second time in like 3 weeks that we've had a commentary about how milk is bad for you, because of course we talked about it on Into the Dark, New Year, New You on Patreon. Yes, but didn't we also have something else? What were we discussing where it was like, oh, like this person's drinking milk because if in a movie, if an adult is drinking milk, it immediately infantilizes them.
Yes, that as well.
Well, I mean, it's kind of odd in a way. I mean, we're the only mammals that drinks another mammal's nourishment that was intended for its young. So there's kind of something unnatural about milk. And then, the whole reason that we have this health campaign about it being strong for your bones is because we had a surplus of it after World War II and we needed to get rid of it. So there's this thing, the milk that we associate with like health is actually in many ways a very unhealthy thing, which is to say nothing of all the hormones that we pump into cattle, right?
Yes.
So I think that's interesting too, just why milk is the beverage that was chosen.
Very much so. I still drink. I'm aware.
I'm not trying to.
I am aware of all the issues with milk.
I mean, you could say the same for the fact that we probably shouldn't be eating meat either.
No, but like what he said when it's like it's hard in your gut and all this stuff. It's like that really is all true. Like calcium may be a benefit, but it's like you can get calcium from other sources. But you know what?
This is true. You could take a pill for that.
It's fine. I'm still gonna drink it before bed.
There we go. Okay. So while she's out driving, Carol listens to a radio show that's talking about the end of the world, and then she gets caught behind a truck with lots of exhaust. It's like, dude, you need to get that vehicle checked out because you are just pumping shit into the air. And she begins to cough, and then it becomes more aggressive, and then she has to frantically pull over into a parking garage so that she can literally gasp for air.
I wrote in my notes in all caps, bitch, pull over.
100%. Like, she looks like she's about to lose control of the car.
Yeah. But this is also, I mean, again, when we're talking about how this movie is scary, it is not, again, you're not getting your typical horror movie scares. The movie is not trying to like get a jolt out of you, get a rise out of you. But there is something inherently terrifying about being sick and not knowing why or how and what to do next. And when the higher ups, the doctors, tell you you're fine. And it is a terrifying mindset to be in. So I really got into that when I was watching this. And so that's why I agree with Mr. Craven. Like, I think this movie is terrifying, just like not in the way that someone would expect.
Right. So that night, Carol is dozing on the couch and she sees an infomercial for something called Deep Ecology, which is basically a spiritual awareness of the earth. And then we see her drinking water. She observes her husband sleeping. We're given the impression that she suffers from insomnia, which could also be a result of the fact that she is not at home in this house. She does not feel comfortable in this marriage. Where she does feel comfortable is outside near the pool where the air is fresh. So I'm going to bring in my one piece for this. It's a article by Joel Blackledge for Brightwall Darkroom called On the Side of the Disease and Not the Cure. And really good piece, lots of interesting ideas. I'll bring it in throughout. But here he says, Haynes maintains a clinical distance from his characters with things like wide lenses, close frames, long takes, and this allows the exceptional production design to take over both the frame, but also Carol herself, who is dwarfed by garish houses and queasy hospitals. And when you start to pay attention, you realize, okay, the long takes we've talked about a little bit, they kind of emotionally distance you, but it also looks like Carol is frequently being eaten by her surroundings. She's so small and insignificant in these giant open spaces that it's like, I think it really helps to visually reinforce how small and insignificant she is. And then you match that with Julianne Moore's performance and her tiny voice. And it's just like this woman is being put upon by forces so much larger than herself.
And you see, if you were teaching this in class, have you taught this in class before?
I haven't. It's fun. I taught, like I said, I taught Carol this semester, and I thought, oh gosh, it would have been really great to teach in conjunction with. I did teach How to Survive a Plague.
Okay.
And thinking about basically how queer people had to become scientific experts in their own right, just to provide some sort of curative, and how they were informing the doctors as to how they should be treated. And I kind of think about this. Carol's in a similar sort of no man's land.
Yeah. No, she didn't have a Louise Hay to go rely on.
Right.
So the next day, Carol has lunch with Linda, and Linda mentions that she's starting a fruit diet, and she would love it if Carol would join her. To me, this is quintessentially mid to late 80s, where it's like, what fad are we on now? Is it lemons? Is it yellow? Is it purple foods? It's
God.
just...
I just think about all the diarrhea they are having from an all-fruit diet.
Yeah, right.
Oh, God.
So we transition from the lunch to then a work dinner where Greg is with his coworkers, and we've got this one dude who's telling a joke about a vibrator that gets stuck in a woman, and Carol is the only person who doesn't laugh at this not particularly funny joke.
Is she asleep?
She just looks completely out of it.
Yeah, she's just zoned out completely.
Which, fair, because this seems excruciating.
Yeah.
Man, I will say, though, because again, like Xander Berkeley, I was primed. I was like, okay, he's going to be the fucking
I know, it's so
asshole.
bad, right? He's got that face where you're just like, well, you're an asshole.
And he is, but I will say that he doesn't go to he doesn't leave her. He is an asshole. Like, he does make her feel bad about things, but he does try in some parts. So I was actually very...
Sure. It's such a low bar, Trey.
He's not as bad as he was in Candyman. We'll put it that way.
There we go.
He's not cheating on her. He's not sleeping with that we know of. He's not cheating on her.
I mean, I fully choose to believe that he and Rory get on a plane and just exit Carol's life at the end of this film. Like, man, I don't think he ever comes back for her.
But I mean, I could have seen a version of this film where he just sort of leaves her there and sends her the divorce papers at the commune.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
I think he is a round character, but still an asshole.
Yeah. Yes. But Rory needs to be jettisoned into space.
I mean... here, let me just do it so that all the people who hate me can just get it out of their system now. This movie has shitty men in it. Most of the men in this movie suck. Okay, so because she did not react, you get the impression that things may have been a little uncomfortable at the table. So she ends up having to apologize to Craig after this. And he's like, well, you know what? Why don't you go and see the doctor? So she goes to Dr. Hubbard, who is played by Stephen Guilford, and he says he finds nothing.
Do you recognize this man at all, Joe?
I feel like I should have, but then I was like, I'm not going to look it up.
No, I don't think it's anything. But he's Mike Brady's boss in both Brady Bunch movies.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't have known that. No.
That's funny.
That's it.
So yes, this is where we get this. In addition to the clean bill of health, this is where we learn a little bit about Carol's eating habits. So she says she doesn't drink and she doesn't do drugs. And this is when she does say she drinks a lot of milk. And he's like, oh, okay, well, that's it right there. You got to stop drinking milk and you got to eat more protein. It's like, okay, yeah, just basically do the opposite of what you've been doing. That should clear it all up.
It's very hard on your digestive system and your intestines. Oh, and stop that fruit diet, by the way. So she's really, she's on two different, she's milk and fruit, which is just diarrhea central.
It's 2 back-to-back episodes, Trace, where you're just talking about diarrhea a lot.
It's interesting. You know, if I'm watching this film today, I'm going like, oh, of course she's just lactose intolerant.
Right.
But I'm wondering when we started talking about that as a thing. Was that talked about in the 80s? I actually don't know.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah.
Man, oh God, there was.
I feel like the dairy industry had a stranglehold on us until like the early 2000s.
It was just like soak wood, right?
There was maybe it was a Nickelodeon cartoon or a kids movie or something that I watched growing up, but there was something where one character was lactose intolerant. And so that is how I knew what it was, because I remember as a kid feeling so sad because the person couldn't drink milk.
Right.
I mean, I have told people, like, the worst things that could ever happen to me is if I go blind so I can't see movies, and if I can't eat cheese because I love dairy so much. And yes, I'm being like super white privilegey, and like I'm not suggesting those are actually the worst things that could happen to me, but I'm just like, I feel like my life would lose a little bit if I couldn't do those two things.
It's less white privilegey if you're talking about the Kraft single slices of American cheese and not a cheese cart that you would get at a fancy restaurant.
But I love a charcuterie board. Okay, so we're having another dinner because this movie is also filled with like meals and sources of community where you can also have uncomfortable conversation. Mm-hmm. So we're at dinner and we have Carol's stepson, Rory, who we've mentioned before. He's played by Chauncey Leopardi. And it's like, what the fuck is this kid
Chauncey? The Rory thing is so funny. So besides Gilmore Girls, did y'all ever watch that show? Okay, this is a deep cut. But did you ever watch that Christina Applegate show, Samantha Who, where she like she was a bitch, but then she got amnesia and she became a nice person afterwards?
Mm-hmm. No.
Okay. Well, basically, she thinks her mom, Jean Smart's cheating on her dad with some guy, and she finds out how his name is Rory, and she's like, Rory. It's like a dog throwing up. Rory.
God. Apologies to any Rorys listening to the podcast.
They have Rory Gilmore, which honestly is not a big step up.
I was going to say, that's not helpful. Anyway, Rory gives us some insight into who he is when he's reading a report about gangs in LA. And then when they're like, why are you telling us this? This is awful. And he goes, it's how it really is.
It's another very uncomfortable moment in this film.
Is there a significance to this scene?
I think to me, it just connotes, I mean, we just made a joke about it, but to me, it connotes their white privilege and they're kind of, they are in the suburbia bubble. They have no idea what real life is like.
Right.
But, you know, like San Fernando Valley is not too far away from like Los Angeles, which means we're on the cusp of like huge racial, like a period of racialized violence, OJ and all these other fun things happening in this area. So to me, this is kind of like, you're very, very white.
Well, and also like how this kid has these racist views and interacts every day, it seems, with the housekeeping.
Yeah.
Or
Fulvia. Oh.
Yeah.
Man, I fully expected like a Fulvia scene. Like I was like, where's her scene? She was doing something.
You know, there's a scene in Far From Heaven where someone is delivering this kind of patronizingly racist speech, and the camera kind of pans slowly to the help, who are all African American.
Yeah, I feel like in a later, if this movie had been made later in Haynes' career, I do actually think we might have gotten a little bit more of that kind of commentary. Mm-hmm. Here, like, it's here, but it's just very under the surface.
Man, but I know we've mentioned Far From Heaven several times, but everyone, if you have not seen Far From Heaven, like, highly recommend it. So fucking good. Maybe watch some Douglas Sirk films first to know what it's doing. Right. But still, it's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So, just in case we liked Greg for some reason, this is also where he says, you know, like she basically says, this is what Dr. Hubbard said. And he goes, oh, well, I think I said the same thing.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Greg. Not helpful. So Carol decides she needs to change her life up a little bit. So when she's at the salon getting her haircut and her manicure, she elects to get a perm. And folks, this is the only extreme close-up in the entire movie, is this like brief montage. And I've seen a couple of different people refer to this as like one of the film's gross out moments, because her hair, like, the result looks great. You know, it's Julianne Moore and she's fantastically gorgeous, but this looks disgusting the way they're doing it. Like, it looks like fingers in ground beef or the earth or something. Like, just the way it's shot, it doesn't look right.
Well, I've never seen a perm be done, so now I'm really happy that I have a visual from Legally Blonde of what ammonium glycolate looks like.
Exactly. Remember, no showers for 24 hours unless you're a murderess. So she consults her new appearance, and, you know, she looks great for a hot second, and then she immediately gets a nosebleed.
Oh, man, this is... It's so funny, right? Because it's just a small thing. It's not really... I mean, people get nosebleeds a lot, I think. But this is meant to be like, oh, no, this is bad. This is really fucking terrifying for her, and it's very scary and fucked up. And it's just, ugh, God.
Well, as we joked in our The Pale Blue Eye episode on Patreon, Trace, this is usually a signifier. Oh, she dying.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. So what you're saying is a nosebleed in the 80s is the equivalent of a cough in the 1800s for consumption.
Yes.
Correct, yes. So when she goes home, Greg tries to initiate sex, and she says that she still has the head thing, to which he replies he doesn't want to hear about it.
This, all right, to me, this is actually the most unlikable this character is in this movie, because I was fully expecting, like, I thought he was going to be out of this movie after this, but then no, he stands by her, for lack of a better term, I guess. This is horrible. Can you imagine just being like, she says it even at some point, she's like, I can't help it.
Yeah.
And she can't.
It's the scene. Yeah. She's like, I can't help it. I'm sorry. And then they just turn off the lights and go to bed.
But I actually did really like this, though, because we shift from this scene to, you know, the next morning. And we focus on Greg as he's getting ready, doing his hairspray, whatever the fuck he's doing. And they just both say, I'm sorry to each other. Yes. And it's like, I actually really related to that, because have y'all ever had like a fight with your significant other and like the next morning, and you go to bed angry, which you're never supposed to fucking do. You make up next morning like, I'm really sorry. Like, because you just need that breather. I don't know. I found this actually very authentic and a movie that's a bit more, you know.
Oh, sure. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where you think, okay, they can have their petty disagreements, but yeah, like they're in it for the long haul. They do actually care about each other. And then she pukes on him.
Oh. She ruined the mood, really.
Really. So I'm going to bring back in Blackledge for a moment. So reading the scene, he says, it appears that she is allergic to her lifestyle. So very much what you said, Andy. Even to her family, her own body is in revolt, making it impossible for her to continue playing this part. So this is a role, and her body is basically telling her, you can't continue to do this anymore. So back to Dr. Hubbard we go, but he still can't find anything physical. That's the key word. So he suggests a stress-related psychiatric consult. So she doesn't really say anything, but we get a couple of scattered scenes about her insomnia. We see her outside. She's smelling the fresh air, and it seems like it's helping her. But also, she's not even allowed to do this because both Greg and a passing police officer checks on her. Like, ma'am, what are you doing? You're acting strange. Shouldn't you be inside your cookie cutter house? So we go to a lethargic jazzercise class where Carol doesn't seem to be very interested. She's not really super responsive in the change room either, but she does see a poster on the bulletin board about smelling fumes. So she investigates by going to visit this guy in this really just dingy, sad-looking office. And she answers a couple questions about her home life and her work life. This is where we get the housemaker as opposed to the housewife.
Okay, so because she says, aren't you supposed to ask me more questions? And his reply is, well, no, you're supposed to tell me things. I'm like, okay, but your patient is clearly a little bit uncomfortable. She needs a bit more guidance. And I feel like a good psychiatrist would have been like, yeah, sure, let's talk about your fucking life.
Well, I think you're misconstruing who this person is. This is like a recruitment officer for like an environmental cult, basically.
Wait. I'm sorry.
This isn't a doctor.
Wait, I thought this was a psychiatrist.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that this was the guy Okay. See, I misread this. I thought that she was going to see the person who put up the flyer about smelling fumes.
No. So she's seeing the psychiatrist who her doctor referred her to.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he says we need to understand what's going on inside you, which is a little bit nefarious, but I think it's a little bit of a test. Like, this movie doesn't like doctors. It has... I mean, I think it's very heavily filtered through a gendered lens. Like, these are all men. They're all kind of talking down to her and telling her, well, I don't really know what you want me to do. Like, I'm trying to help you, but we're not finding anything. So it feels to me like just another step in that where people can't really help her and she doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is really common in, like, the female Gothic, right? The similarities of this film, for instance, to something like the Yellow Wallpaper are pretty strong, actually.
Yes.
That being infantilized by the medical profession and her husband and kind of devolving into psychosis. It's, there's a through line for sure.
For sure. I do understand why this scene is here, like why this psychiatrist is acting this way to her, because that's part of the film's commentary.
Right. He's a shit psychiatrist.
Yeah, I'm just like, come on. And that also comes from, like, I'm married to a counselor, so like, every time this happens, my husband's like, that man would not, that's not good.
He's terrible.
That's not good.
Revoke his license. Ask more questions of this woman.
But not Basic Instinct. That was right?
Right.
That's fine.
That's a
That's
great
totally
portrayal. So just in case we didn't get enough of a sense of how badly she now fits into this life, we go to a baby shower for Barbara, who is played by Ronnie Farrer, and it's just immediately overwhelming. We see Carol crying in the bathroom, and I do love that the way that the door opens and closes is almost like a wipe. It's like, it's like we're editing, but we're not.
Wait, I'm sorry. And to defend my introduction to this episode, one of these women presents a present, and they're like, and she's like, "Oh, did you wrap that yourself? God, I wish I were that creative." Well, I've seen you wrap things. This is also because we have this whole baby shower going on, all these fucking moms. Carol goes to the bathroom to collect herself.
Right.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only time we get to see people in the movie, like characters, without Carol present. So we're not really in Carol's POV, and it's when the moms are gossiping about her.
Yes, they're talking shit about her while she's not there.
Oh, God. I mean, granted, it's not the worst things they could have said, but it's very much like we're talking about you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks to the need for drama that arises when you maybe don't have as many other things. Like, I remember having conversations with my sister when she first had my niece, and she was like, I would kill for adult conversation with another person right now, because all I do is talk baby talk all day. And I can't help but wonder if these women are like, we have all these babies, but also our lives are just occupied by like birthday parties and dinner parties and other things. Like, let's talk shit about Carol when she's not here.
I thought you were going to say that your sister said I would kill my baby if I could.
Oh my God,
Christ.
no.
Oh my God. In the Midwest, they had bunco parties, which was their opportunity to get together and play cards and bitch about their husbands.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that.
With kids present?
No kids present.
Yeah. Well, because what I love about the gossiping scene too is that we have this woman who can't stop licking the icing off of her fingernail, and she keeps telling her child, like, "Give us mommy time." And I'm like, oh, honestly though, like, it's so necessary. I mean, as someone who does not have kids, who will never have kids, like, ooh. Mommy time. Give it to me.
Right.
Well, and then if anybody needs mommy time, it is Carol, because she's like, do not put this child on my lap. I will have a breathing fit.
This, I mean, again, we have like the muffled sound, so we kind of get into Carol's head. She is wheezing. The child looks visibly uncomfortable with this.
Yeah, what's going on? What's wrong with this woman?
This is a really... I found this a very difficult scene to watch, if only because I felt it just made me very anxious.
Well, the child that they pick, of course, looks like a miniature version of Julianne Moore, right? She also has the permed red hair. The dress is very similar. I think it's to, activate that fear of heteronormativity that she has deep in her, that this would be her biological child, right? This is her future at this baby shower that she's looking at and having a panic attack.
Right. If you're not careful, this is where you're going to end up.
Little does she know that her future is not as bright.
No. So again, just in case you weren't making these connections, our next sequence is actually panning across all of these family photos at the house. And Carol is writing a letter talking about her health condition. And she's sitting in bed, kind of writing this in the dark. And this is when Greg barges in and he's basically like, "Mara, what are you doing? I was calling you and you didn't answer. I didn't think you were home."
There's something about Moore's she looks at him and she's like, "Oh God, what is this? Where am I right now?" And there's a special feature of this Blu-ray too, where it's just Julianne Moore and Todd Haynes, and they were just having a conversation, 20 years after the movie came out, about this movie. And she talks about how what she loved that Todd Haynes does was he would give her a shot list, and so she would look at the shot list and base her performance on what the shots were going to be. Whereas so many directors would be like, she'd go, "Where's the shot list?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know yet. What do you want to do?" And I'll build my shot list up of that. And she's like, "Well, no, I need the shot list first, so I know how you're going to frame it, so I know how to perform. If we do it the other way, I'm the director and you're not." And this is one of those scenes too where I'm like, these little moments where it's like my heart breaks for her when she gives lines like this.
Well, she seems so vulnerable, and I think anybody who's ever experienced uncertainty around their own health has had a moment like this where you're just like, what is going on? I was healthy and now suddenly something has changed and I don't know what it is and I'm scared. And particularly at this point, she's been to a doctor and she's been to a psychiatrist, and they both are like, "We can't help you. We don't know what's going on either." That's terrifying.
We haven't discussed age much since we started the plot of this, but do we want to talk about maybe like what Carol is feeling and going through is comparable to people that had HIV and AIDS in the 80s at the time, like the social isolation and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of sheer unknowingness of cure and a lot of people with HIV turning to alternative therapies when the medical institutions seem to be failing them.
Yeah, I mean, the very next scene after this is when she goes to the first sort of seminar. So we transition over to this video that's talking about, they all have this strange, never-ending ailments that their friends and family say is an overreaction. And I think it's really interesting that this is actually where Carol starts to form a bit of a community. Like, she's able to actually be a little bit more open and free about how she's experiencing the world, because these other people are either suffering the same things or they're curious enough to have come out to it. And that does also remind me of like why it's important to maintain some kind of community, even if it's not with your family or your friends, and I think that there was a kind of solidarity among gay men. The problem is that a lot of the time, if you knew someone who also was suffering from it, they may just die unexpectedly. And it's not like you just got a phone or a computer where you could just like reach out and say, "How you doing?" It's like, if you don't see them, they may just be dead and you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that she can still try is something called neutralization provocation test. So she goes to Dr. Reynolds, played by Peter Crombie, and he basically just jabs her repeatedly with needles with different things to see if she will react to it. And this is where we learn that she does react to milk. And for me, this was the hardest scene in the movie to watch. They just stand around watching her as she wheezes almost to the point of unconsciousness so that they can get a determination like, okay, yeah, it's this one that's affecting you.
Have you all ever been through one of these types of things?
I have. Yeah. You? Yeah.
May I ask, what were you related to?
So let's see. It's funny because they did the pricks on my arm and left and then came back and the nurse goes, "Whoa, that's the mother load."
Oh, God. That's
right.
not what you want to hear.
Exactly.
Wait, what was it?
Let's see. Black mold was my worst one. That was a huge bolt. Grass and cats and dust mites. So life,
dust mites,
basically.
That's a rough one.
Yeah.
I am fortunate enough to, as far as I know, not be allergic to anything. But yeah, my husband had one. It was on his back. But yeah, he's allergic to like literally every type of grass.
Oh, I've heard of that before. Yeah. Apparently that's becoming more common in a bunch of kids because, I mean, concerned parents will say, oh, well, it's because, kids aren't going outside enough. So when they do touch grass, like they discover they're allergic to it because they haven't ever had to develop any kind of antibodies. And I'm like,
right.
Okay, well, now you're starting to sound like this movie.
Well, it's not that grass was never intended to be there. It really should not exist in Arizona or wherever.
But, Joe, I'm curious. So what about this particular, is it just because it's in a doctor's office where there's people around her and they just have to wait and watch her suffer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they understand that she's having a reaction, but rather than help her, they just wait to see how bad it is. And I think it plays into my fear that you could still be surrounded by people, even trained people who are there to help you, and you would still have to go through and experience this uncomfortable. And I mean, I'm not afraid of dying, but I also don't like to think about what it could feel like. And this comes close to what I imagine asphyxiation is like.
Yeah. When it comes to worst ways to die, I feel like burning to death, drowning, and suffocation. We all just want to die in our sleep. That's how we want to go, right?
Right? I want to be that girl from Wrong Turn 4 where she just goes out into the wilderness, gets hypothermia, and dies by a tree 100 feet away from a highway.
Okay, but I feel like freezing to death, I guess... I guess you... Well, I guess you would essentially fall asleep.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I guess that's fine. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to the cold up here in Colorado, so I'm like, it's cold.
It's okay, Trace. You're not dying. You're just cold. Andy and I are like, bitch, welcome to our world. Right, this is what we've been living with for decades. So we do learn as a result of this test that they can find ways to mitigate it so that they can kind of turn it on and off, but they don't have a cure. So they can't make it go away. Something she will have to learn to live with. So we're back in the seminar. Trace, did you recognize Becky?
Oh, Beth Grant? Fuck yeah. Beth Grant. I love Beth Grant. But when I was in school, in college, in film school, quote unquote, why did I even say that?
Why say quote unquote?
It was film school. No. But I was lucky enough to walk through the main area of the UT campus, UT Austin, and there was a flyer with Beth Grant's face on it, and I was like, whoa, what's this? She came and gave a fucking speech, and it was literally to a classroom, because it was just come to this seminar if you want to go to it, just to a classroom full of people. So my boyfriend at the time, and one of our friends came, and we all brought, I brought Southland Tales, my friend brought Donnie Darko, and my other friend brought Sordid Lives, and we all had her sign it. But this is a character actress who is look, I know we always talk about Margot Martindale as character actress Margot Martindale. Beth Grant is not the original character actress, but she is the character actress that I grew up with, where I will recognize this woman from anything. And the day she dies, I will have a procession for her in my own home. I love this woman so much.
So, yes, Becky is telling this seminar people about basically how to create a safe room, which is a kind of an area that is free from these environmental triggers that might be affecting them. And this is where Carol is bonding with some other people. And then, we end up going from this, which is quote unquote, a bit of a safe space mentally for Carol where she can talk to people about what's really happening. And then she goes to lunch with Linda, and Linda could not fucking care about anything that's going on. But also, I do love that every time we have a scene like this where we're specifically interacting with Linda, a lot of the time these lunches, there's just cars and traffic and noise, and you can smell the pollution in all of these scenes, and you're like, Carol, get out of there.
But so, is the Beth Grant thing, is she meant to be an acolyte of the Renwood people, or is she just a different kind of self-help thing?
I think so.
Okay. It apparently was very intentional, by the way, that in these scenes, it's the first time we see people of color in the film.
Oh, interesting. So she has to leave the cookie cutter white world and start interacting with other people.
But at the same time, I mean, look, I know we'll talk about this later as we get to the end of the film and whether it's a happy or a sad ending. It's not happy, by the way. But it's the same when she's with all these women out after this Beth Grant seminar talking, and they're all validating everything she is going through. To the point where I'm so happy for this character that she's getting to experience this, even if it's leading her essentially into a cult.
Is this the scene where she says that I ate fruit that had touched a newspaper?
I think so.
And that made me
with Linda.
There's something about this too, where she seems to be becoming more and more sensitive, and I think it's that this idea of being allergic to her environment becomes her identity, right? And that everything she's looking for the source. Oh, it must be cologne left on your shirt from another day.
It's okay. So I don't know if I said my scabies thing on the podcast before, but I've had scabies twice in my life. It is not fun. It is not also a metric for how clean you are, by the way.
Right.
But it's a thing where it's okay, you have scabies, you're getting these itches like rashes. It is terrifying because you have to do X amount of things to get rid of scabies. And there's the only way to tell if you've gotten rid of them is to keep sleeping in your apartment and hope you don't. It's same with bed bugs, actually, where you hope you don't have welts on your body when you wake up the next morning. And it is so stressful, and that stress obviously manifests in physical ways, and to the point where I remember I did a really bad thing when I was rooming with a girl, and when I was out of town, she let a friend come over and sleep in my bed, and both of us had scabies before. And I told her, I was like, well, hey, just so you know, I had a scabies resurgence, so you better tell your friend that that she might have scabies. Wow. And that was a lie. But I was mad because she let someone sleep in my bed and didn't ask me. But she was like, Trace, you can't do that because literally you say scabies and I start itching my body. Because 100%. I feel and that is what that is. And so, yeah, all of this really spoke to me on my 2 times with scabies. My memories of that.
Yeah, I mean, so to bring Blackledge back into this, he does say, we may wonder whether Carol really is sick, or is she waking up to the fact that her environment itself is built on illness of one sort or another. And I imagine that there are probably people who watch this movie and think, she's a hypochondriac. Like, she keeps going to doctors. They keep telling her nothing's wrong, but she is convincing herself that she is getting worse, that she is reacting. And that manifests, like, it's about the mind's ability to physically manifest symptoms.
Right.
I personally don't believe that. I do believe that she is reacting to her environment, but that's also because I feel like as horror enthusiasts, we are primed that when people say something is happening to them, they are not lying about it. It is actually happening to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do believe that she's sick, but in the way that it aligns with her being almost allergic to her role as mother and housewife, there's something psychological going on as well for me.
I love that reading, by the way, Andy.
Thanks.
But there's still physical evidence of her disease all over her body. Like, so it's the thing where when you have the doctor saying there's nothing physically wrong with you. It's like, well, no. There's literally something physically wrong with her right now.
But I think it's because they can't pinpoint what the origin is, right? So they can't say like, oh, well, we did a blood test and your blood test proves that you have early onset Alzheimer's or like blah, blah, blah. Like, because they can't find what it is, they say that, oh, well, you don't actually have any physical symptoms. You've got a bunch of like random symptoms, but we don't know what that is.
But again, that's the fear though, right? Like, again, like you were having these physical whatevers on your body, and the doctors are saying, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, what the fuck are you supposed to do?
Right.
Well, one thing that you could do is you could unload. So loading is the maximum amount of toxins that your body can tolerate. So you could unload by fasting for up to 5 days. You could do a rotation or a rare food diet, but you can't have any mold-based foods. So no bread or cheese or coffee or booze. And all of this will keep you safe. Very safe, safe. Until, of course, you go to the dry cleaners and they're spraying, and then you have a seizure of some kind and your lips start bleeding and you have to go to the hospital.
2 things. One, maybe it's because I've watched way too much gay porn, but the word load just really puts certain images in my mind. And so they keep saying load. But the other one, a cleaner version. So for this seizure scene, I guess right before this movie was filmed, there was a big Los Angeles earthquake. And Julianne Moore had witnessed someone have like an aftershock seizure on a subway or a train or something. And so she didn't know what she was going to do for this scene because she'd never seen someone have a seizure before. And luckily, quote unquote, she got to see someone have a seizure on a subway. And so she mimicked them to do this scene.
Wow. I mean, you don't have to go some method.
We did say this film doesn't like doctors, but a lot of what they're saying isn't wrong. The way that we store stress in our body, the way that it manifests physically. I've had acid reflux for most of my life. This is actually weird. I'll overshare for a minute.
Go ahead.
I also have had IBS ever since I've started, my tenure case. So like your mind-gut connection is so strong. And in fact, I had a seizure when I was younger. When I was 14 to 17, I would have seizures. They think now that I didn't. I thought I was epileptic for most of my life. What they think now is that I just had extreme panic attacks when I was an adolescent, because they started when I was starting to deal with my sexuality, and they ended when I went away to college.
Wow.
May I ask, how old were you when you started to deal with your sexuality?
Around 14, right?
Okay.
When it happened, yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm sorry. I'm glad you mentioned the IBS. No, but I've talked to many gay men, especially bottoms, who were like, "Yeah, it's really hard to bottom when you have IBS," and I'm like, "Yeah, it really sucks." Sure. But do y'all have any that physical manifestations of your stress? Because I know for me, mine absolutely is. I get canker sores in my mouth when I'm really stressed out.
Oh, sure. I actually, when I went away to university, I started to catalog my symptoms based on degree of severity. So my first reaction is I start to get hangnails, and then I get canker sores, and then I start to get weird fluctuations in like my aisle twitch.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think we all know, men know that erectile dysfunction is a result of stress and anxiety. So, all those things. I since I've been managing my stress better with meditation and yoga and therapy, lo and behold, my acid reflux is not as terrible as it used to be.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you would say that you're better able to take loads.
Oh my god.
Well, yeah. We'll wait till the After Dark podcast.
I'm sorry. For anyone who has canker sores as their symptom, please use alum. It is a mineral used in pickling cucumber, anything really, but it's really good for drying out your canker sores and making them not feel bad. So that's my TED Talk.
Farmer's Almanac.
There we go. Yep. We're not being sponsored by Big Pickle. Okay, so late at night, one night, Carol sees an ad for Wrenwood, which is a cooperative treatment center run by Peter Dunning, who is played by actor Peter Friedman, and this transitions into a slow fade as Carol is traveling through the desert. We're entering into the back half of the film, and our introduction to this compound, community, whatever you want to call it, is Nell, played by Mary Carver, running out into the desert and just effectively saying, "Get out! Stop!"
So, okay, Joe, again, I don't think you're going to get this, but do you know what we should know her from?
No.
She is Margaret, the lovely, super kind neighbor who gets bitten by a spider first in Arachnophobia.
Oh, God.
Oh, really?
Yes!
Oh, okay.
Because I always get her confused with the bread woman from Seinfeld, but she is not that same woman.
They're just both old women, aren't they, Trace?
Yeah. Who were just doing things in the 90s.
Yeah, so the fact that this cab has arrived on scene means that it is effectively polluting the air. So, of course, this is why Nell doesn't want them there. We'll learn a little bit more about her in a bit. But Carol is welcomed by Susan, who is played by April Grace, and she's given a tour, and she's hugged by Wrenwood's director, who is Claire, played by Kate McGregor Stewart.
I don't know if we want to talk about this now or when we get to the actual end of the movie, but I'm so conflicted because I know that this is a cult. I know that this is a lot of bullshit, especially once we get,
It's tricky because I feel like here you're just like, oh, my new age radar is going off. Like these are hippies. They're going to practice some new age things. Like if a crystal had been produced at any point, it would have felt right in. But it's when we get the welcome speech from Claire in the chapel, and she talks about how we need to have modest dress and refrain from sex and no talking during meals. I was like, cult.
No, for me, yes, all of those things are signifiers, but it's as soon as Peter gives his little fucking spiel and he walks off, and then this fucking bitch comes up and starts singing a song.
Oh my god.
It's a hymn.
Hard
it's a hymn.
Exit. Get out.
I was immediately dragged back to Catholic Mass. I was like, no, this is bad. Don't do this.
I mean, surely you're not suggesting that Catholicism is a cult.
Oh, yeah. No, that's, okay. That is the thing. So, again, I haven't been a practicing Catholic in a very, very long time, but my entire childhood I was. And it's always the Nicene Creed. Again, it's the prayer that everyone says, the Mass, where it's like, imagine a congregation of people just going, "We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth." It sounds fucking terrifying.
Yeah. But like you were just starting that, I could also recite it with you. It is the effectiveness of rote memorization and fear.
It's ingrained, yeah. But I mean, I think just because I've become more cognizant in doing the podcast that we do have religious listeners, and I do feel like often horror films prefer to present a darker side of religion. I think there's something comforting in ritual. And we may look at this practice like Ren would from the outside and say, ooh, it's giving off big cult vibes. But like, we don't ever see, like, there's no more peril, really, for Carol when she comes here. Like, the scariest moment for her will be when she gets too close to the highway and she breathes in truck exhaust and she has to go for her oxygen tank. But, like, she is happy here.
But it's like, on a macro level, I hate this for Carol. Because, yes, it is a cult, it's a religion, they're using her money, whatever.
Oh, yeah, because this place is also, like, super rich and fancy. Yes. Like, you know that they are just raking it in from all these folks.
But on a micro level, I'm so happy for her because I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but it's the part where she walks out and she just starts sobbing because it's also the first time that she's had like human contact in this movie, and she's around people who are similar to her. They're all in equally bad situations with their disease. But there's a support system there. And so while, again, as a whole, yes, this place is a cult and this Peter guy needs to go die.
Whoa, okay.
He's terrible. We'll get to it later. But at the same time, the people that are there, like, I'm just so happy that she has this support system, even though by the end of the film she's completely isolated.
Well, yeah, there are people there that believe her, right?
Yes.
I mean that's a big step.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, Peter is on this spectrum of not great men in this movie. He to me comes off mostly as a bit of a phony. Like when we hear him talk and speechify, you're just like, okay. And even the way that Sarah introduces him, so he gets up on stage to do this welcome address after Claire to do this kind of welcome ceremony, and it's Sarah who leans over and says, Peter is chemically sensitive and has AIDS, so he has incredible insight.
Yes.
And yeah, like it's an interesting way to introduce this character because he very much seems like Sage on the stage, right? He's going to lead them to salvation and all these uncomfortable religious undertones. But at the same time, we understand that he is effectively the one who built this system, and all of the women seem very comfortable with him. And I don't know if that's because he's gay coded, or if it's just like, oh, he actually believes me. He's a man who finally fucking believes me.
So apparently, I don't know if it was, I guess maybe in the Sundance cut, or maybe it was after Sundance, but there was the shot of his mansion on this compound was excised from the film.
What? No.
And Haynes decided to add it back after the fact to be like, oh, wait, no, because people wanted to see this guy's
It's
hypocrisy.
important. It confirms our suspicions about him.
But to me, it's so funny. To me, it's not even the mansion. Before that, it's whenever he goes to talk to Carol when she has her oxygen tank again. And she mentions, like, oh, I might need to move cabins because I'm downwind of some pollution or whatever. And he's like, oh, well, Claire's really the person to talk to about that. Yeah. And I'm like, go fuck yourself.
Oh, I don't handle the menial tasks. You'll have to speak to my assistant.
and that's the thing. It's like a thing. Is this a happy? Well, fuck. I'll stop. I'll stop until we get to the ending.
Yeah, so after all of this is the point where Carol has her kind of emotional breakdown. And I think it's actually a really nice moment. We get Claire acknowledging that her reaction is normal because she's finally taken this big step on her own behalf, right? So much of the first half of this film is about what Carol is societally expected to do. She has to go to lunch. She has to go to jazzercise. She has to listen to stories about vibrators at company dinners. And here it's like, you're doing this just for you, Carol, and it's okay if that really gets you emotionally. So Carol writes to Greg and Rory. She explains that she thinks this is starting to help, but yeah, she does have this close encounter with the truck on the highway, and she's carting around this oxygen tank, and she is relying on it. The minute she starts to smell something in the air, she's got the mask on. So you do still get the impression that even as she's writing one thing, her condition, whether it's mental or physical or something in the middle, she is deteriorating or becoming more symptomatic.
But this whole, like, right before this whole thing, because it's when she's crying and Claire comes up and Claire just tells her, like, I had the same experience. I just looked at myself in the mirror and I said, Claire, I love you. I really love you. And that started making her feel better. And at the end of a month, she was able to leave her room, and shortly after, she was walking again. And it seems like a nice little scene. It is, but it will play a vital part in the conclusion of this film.
Yeah. So the other vital piece, if only for the marketing of this film, and I think that this almost does the film a disservice. Yeah. Blame the marketing folks, not the actual direction. But Peter stops by, and this is where we get a glimpse of Nell's husband, Lester, who is played by Rio Hackford. Not that you would ever know. This could be a Martian, because this is a man who walks around in a full hazmat suit all the time.
Kind of. It's more like a bunch of wool clothing items that he has taped around his body.
And I went back to look at the scene again, because there's something just strange about the way that he walks.
Oh, he looks like the alien from Signs.
Yeah. I was going to describe it as a baby giraffe with polio.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, we learned that Lester is very, very ill, and that is the reason why Nell was so confrontational when Carol first arrived. It wasn't really about her. It was like, Lester is dangerously close to dying, and as a result, we all need to be protective of the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Carol signs up for meal prep share, and this is when we get a bit of a meet cute with Chris, who is played by James LeGros. And then Lester dies, and he gets taken away by an ambulance, and everybody's a little bit like, okay.
That flippant delivery of that.
I mean, Lester's not really a character. He's more, I don't want to say it's a sight gag, but I think if we're saying spectrum in this episode, he's on the far end of like, oh, Carol, this is where your journey could go.
Right.
Not if you're not careful, but just like, this is how far it can go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. James, I'm glad you said LeGros, because I've literally called him LeGros my entire life. As if he's a regular name in this household. And Jessica Harper, dude.
Oh, yes. Playing Joyce, who only gets a couple of scenes, but I do think it's interesting that we start to get an idea of who these people are. Like, why are they here? So in Joyce's case, she says she got sick because she was punishing herself for her son's illness. So it's very much this idea, kind of like what you were saying, Andy, that our emotional state can literally affect our health and wellness to the point that it's like, okay, well, are you carrying rage? Are you carrying stress? And so on. Those are going to come out.
It's even darker for me, because the way he asked the question, if I recall, is, why do you think you're sick?
Yes. Yes.
And for me, that's what I said earlier, it feels almost Calvinist, right? That like, what did you do wrong that caused you to, have this illness?
And that's the thing I was talking about at the beginning, where it's like, they get the validation here. They have people that are just like them. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the entire mentality of this cult is, but you were the one that is causing this. Mm-hmm. You have to fix it. And on a level, I'm like, look, I get it. Yes, we have stress-induced physical issues that happen in our bodies. I mean, we all have those things. But that's the cult mindset of like, but it's your fault, so we have to keep working on you to keep you here.
Mm-hmm. We have to take you through the Scientology levels to clear your blockages.
Yes. And so, oh God, it's, again, I'm so torn, because I'm so happy for this woman by the end of this film, but I'm also so fucking sad. I didn't cry, but I was heartbroken at the end of this movie.
Yeah. So when Greg and Rory visit, that's when we also get some additional insight into Peter. This is when he talks about how he stopped reading newspapers or watching the news because he doesn't need the negative fatalistic attitude. He's very much talking the talk and walking the walk, but it's so performative, right? Like this idea that, well, you really are responsible for your own illness, for your sickness, how you feel, and so on. And this is the moment where we also, on the nighttime walk, get to see, well, he lives in a fucking mansion. So you know what? You may be bringing your fatalistic, cynical mindsets here, but also he gets to profit and live in that mansion because of your illness.
Yeah, fuck this fucker.
Well, it's interesting too because I said this film feels like was made today, not just a sort of relationship to COVID and our fear of contact with other people, but this sort of like isolationism, right? That I'm not going to read the news anymore. I'm going to insulate myself within this singular worldview.
Yeah,
that feels so modern.
Yeah, that was the kind of thought process I had when I was watching this. It feels to a certain extent like some of these people are burying their heads in the sand. Like, well, if I remove myself from society, then I won't have to deal with society's ills.
I mean, this sounds like anti-vaxxers kind of stuff at times. This rhetoric, right?
You know, so this is a little personal, but so when the pandemic started, I was able to work from home for about a year. And I definitely retreated. There are certain things I really like about working from home, and certain things I don't. And the things I don't like is I think it feeds my worst impulses, because I'm historically a very extroverted person. And the pandemic had brought out introverted tendencies I did not know that I had. And on top of that, what you just said, Andy, about how, let's hide from information because, like, whatever, that protects us. I found that I even do that. I mean, like, you know, with everything on Twitter nowadays, you know, with all the Musk shit and whatever, I'm like, you know what? I'm on Twitter, but I'm just going to ignore that, because if I ignore it, it's not a problem for me. Right. And on a level, it's like self-preservation. Yeah. But I understand, like, but watching this, and again, even on the bonus feature of this Blu-ray, they talk about that, about how, these people are wanting to avoid information, they want to avoid news, and I'm like, fuck, I'm doing that to myself. Not to the same extent, but
I think we've also talked about this in terms of like protecting yourself. Like, what is the responsibility of an individual versus, you know, what do you need to give back to the community and be aware and that kind of stuff. But to bring it back to the loading and unloading idea, I think we can also only carry so much, right? Like, so much information, so much emotional reactions, and sometimes you do need to protect yourself. Like, I'm very much an advocate for, if you can help, you need to, because you have a social responsibility. But at the end of the day, you also have to be responsive to how you react. So, like, sometimes you do need to bury your head in the sand and retreat and live in isolation in a hermetically sealed igloo.
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, after Trump got elected, I didn't want to read newspapers for a while. I had protest fatigue. So, absolutely.
I mean, I think to a certain extent, that's when you acknowledge, I have an element of privilege that I can afford to do this and not have to deal with it and be on the front lines. I mean, I think if we're reading this from an AIDS allegory perspective, it's also like, okay, well, Carol is rich enough that she can afford to walk away. She can go and get private health treatments, whereas other people would just have to stay where they are and deal with it.
Right.
So Carol doesn't end up moving into Lester's igloo, and Greg and Rory are there to help, and then they basically say, okay, we're going to fly away. And as Greg touches her, she ends up having to pull away because of his smell. It's his cologne, except that he's not wearing any cologne.
He says...
You're like, well, Greg, you were a shithead earlier. I don't know if I fully believe you.
Yeah, more likely it was his, what would have been the 80s equivalent of Axe body spray, like a jerky.
Oh my god.
Noir.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Andy, how old are you?
I'm, I have to do the math, 45.
So yeah, was Axe body spray a thing when you and Joe were...
I think of that as associated with the late 90s, I'm going to say.
It's very much my middle school. I like all the gym locker rooms smelled like Axe body spray.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that it's a deodorant, not an antiperspirant, right?
Yes. Yeah, it took Trace a long time to figure out the difference between those two things.
It's a body spray. Don't you dare call it a cologne, because that's gay.
Yes. Oh my god.
It's all fragile masculinity.
Oh shit.
Oh,
yes.
for sure.
What were those? Oh, if you do that, that's gay things. Is there one that you remember like having a really big impact on you as a kid?
I was so afraid of piercing the wrong ear that I just didn't get either. I just didn't get either ear pierced.
Mine was, if you think you have something on your foot, you have to bring your foot in front, not like raise it behind, like near your butt.
Mine is the hey, look at your nails really quick, and if you hold your hand out, that's gay. You're supposed to do the backwards version.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So helpful. All of these things, really instrumental in helping me to decide, oh, those people are trash, stay away from them.
Oh, I remember them with earrings. They used to say left is right, right is wrong.
Yes. And I remember being so confused that it was the left ear that was the straight one.
Right. That's why I just never got my ear pierced at all. I wasn't sure.
Whereas I just contemplated getting my eyebrow pierced.
Oh, God. At least it wasn't in your belly button.
Oh boy.
It's not as bad as because when you get your dick pierced, you have to stay hard the entire time. And to this day, I don't understand people do. I don't understand. Like, how do you do that?
And I don't think it's sexy.
It's not.
So Carol and Chris are at dinner prep and they're joking, and it's very clear, like, in my mind, Lester is like the far extreme of one side, and then Chris is kind of a, hey, get a divorce from shitty Greg and end up with this guy, because at least he understands your situation, right? He's also here.
Yeah.
Did y'all read James LeGros' character as queer?
Wait, which one?
So this is Chris, the guy.
Chris. Yeah, I didn't. I thought he was trying. I thought he was hitting on her.
See, I thought maybe this is my like toxic masculinity coming out, but like it's whenever they're about to do her birthday party, it's like, it's Carol's birthday. I was like, oh, he's gay.
I mean, it could be an actor versus character thing too.
True.
I don't think he's gay in real life, but maybe.
I don't know. Okay, so I do want to have a conversation about Peter's dreams, because after dinner, when we're talking about Lester, we're sort of reminiscing. Everybody's sort of like quiet, reserved. And then Peter says he had a dream about AIDS lesions turning into flowers and like sort of floating away. And do you think this is just meant to represent his kind of positive mindset, or is this something more significant?
Well, I think it depends, though. Do you think that Peter knows he's full of shit, or do you think that he is like believing all of his bullshit?
I think he believes it. I don't think so too. Yeah, I don't think it's that type of cult where he's trying to, hoodwink him. I think that but as an AIDS patient, I mean, you've exhausted all of the possible, medical therapies, and what do you have left? So I think he is clinging to this for sure.
I mean, it's also a dream, right? Like, it's the thing that he aspires to, the thing that he wants. It's also the thing that even if he is bilking these people for money duplicitously, it still doesn't help him, right? He gets to live in a mansion, but he's probably still going to die of AIDS.
Yeah, but you know what? If you have a time clock on your life and you know when it's going to end, you probably want to make the most of it. And you know what? Living your life in a mansion for your last 2 months of life, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, like if the alternative is...
I guess. So I'm fascinated by y'all's response to that, because I thought that he was aware of his bullshit.
Okay. But why? I mean, what is he going to do with the money that he's bilking off these people?
I guess maybe it's my cynicism. It's not even his personal game, but yeah, it's just what I just said. Like, he has a finite amount of time left because of his AIDS diagnosis, so he's gonna make the most of it and live on a mansion on a commune where he has a bunch of people who worship him.
I think that he's someone who he has like absorbed the idea that his AIDS was God's punishment on him, and now he creates this society that they're not supposed to have sex at all, right? And so that's my feeling with his character is that
is fucking that's like some self-hatred going on there, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it. I guess I just forgot about the no sex part, but yes, that is a very vital part of this community.
That whole part of it reminds me a lot of Heaven's Gate, right? Where, I forget his name, Applegate, something like that, where he, wanted to chemically castrate himself because he was so self-loathing of his sexuality.
Well, I love myself, so.
No chemical castration in your future.
I look in the mirror and I say, you know what? You're pretty cool.
Okay, so yeah, we've got this impromptu dance party, and then we bring out this cake for her birthday, and Carol makes this very awkward, kind of rambly speech about how the world is becoming more aware of diseases, and it's very nonsensical, but everybody still toasts her.
But this whole, because she's trying to use the lingo, the language of the cult, and she's not getting it right. So, to me, this is also Carol, who, as the entire film has been a blank slate, is trying to make something of herself. She's trying to be somebody, and she's still not getting it, quote-unquote, right.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what makes this scene even more heartbreaking to me. And, she it's so funny because Moore says, like, during this monologue, she actually did forget her line. So even though there are supposed to be, it's a monologue pepper with ellipses, she did forget her lines at one point. She just kept going.
Right.
And it worked. But yeah, this scene, it just shows me that, yeah, while Carol has found a safe place of sorts, she still doesn't know who she is. And honestly, the part where she opens it with, I hated myself before I came here. And that was, again, it's just like, I really can't articulate how badly I feel for this woman, especially knowing that there's nothing I can do to make her feel better, because the film doesn't let you know if she ever gets better.
Right.
Yeah. So after all of this, she ends up walking back to the igloo with Chris, and there's a suggestion that something could happen with these two down the line, if you want to read it that way. But as soon as she goes inside, she immediately takes a hit off that oxygen tank, and then we see her. It's strange because I know that she has had like physical deterioration on her face throughout her time at this commune, but it really becomes starkly clear in this image when she looks at herself in the mirror and tells herself that she loves herself. But it's like, it looks like a combination of sunburn and also AIDS lesions.
Can we talk a little bit about like the design of this igloo?
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you want to say?
I mean, it's so gray and utilitarian. It looks like a bomb shelter, right?
It does, yes. Absolutely.
So this is where I can't find any comfort in this space, honestly.
Well, but do you think she does?
I think she's accepted it like she has to. Like, this is her only strategy left.
Yeah.
Well, it's that thing whenever Greg leaves, and her line is, it's only for a little while, and you're just like, oh, bitch.
Yeah, you're like, bitch, no, it's not. This is your new life. This is your life now.
And God,
it's horrible.
It's so sad. I mean, she's living in an igloo on she's isolated from society on a commune, and then isolated from the commune in this igloo.
Right.
Like, she is on her way to becoming Lester.
Right.
And we know how that ends.
And, you know, it has this, like, one shelf, and it's all sort of beige clothing and a line of shoes. It looks, It's
just empty. Like, it's not empty, but it is empty. The bed looks like a hospital bed. Yeah. I do love, though, like, because before she starts, she looks at the mirror, she's talking to the mirror. She's looking at it, but the mirror is us. And so we're basically, like, forced to look at a reflection of ourselves. It just happens to look like Carol. This ending really, really fucked me up in the best way possible.
It's
I love this.
Bleak.
It's a tomb, right?
Yes,
it is.
Yes.
Yeah, she's interning herself.
And so I didn't look at many reviews of this film, but one is the famed Janet Maslin of the New York Times. But no, she really liked the first half of the film, but she didn't really like the second half, saying that as brilliantly as it begins, Safe eventually succumbs to its own modern malady, as the filmmaker insists on a chilly ambiguity that breeds more detachment than interest. Mr. Haynes makes fools of the film's New Agers, while possibly embracing some of their views. She also says that another problem is that the shadow of AIDS implicitly hangs over Carol's decline, but it doesn't help bring Safe to a conclusion worthy of its inspired beginning. And to that, so
it didn't give me the ending I wanted, therefore the back half.
Well, and so I was trying to do some research. You know, apparently, like the mindset of 1995 was one very much steeped in positivity, which is really tying into the New Age mindset of like, hey, like, you know, love yourself, you'll get better. Sure. So because the widespread belief of positivity was that, this non-positive ending was really confronting and confusing for a lot of people.
I mean, I can see it. Like, it's easy for us to look at this in hindsight and say, this movie is a fucking masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Julianne Moore's performance is unparalleled, and the bleakness is an inherent... Like, to me, that is a strength of the film because it makes me feel so uncomfortable and sad for her. Like,
Yeah.
I've struggled to connect emotionally to this woman because she is vacant. Like, she is a ghost in her own world. And this ending makes me feel so strongly for her, even though I don't think she herself even recognizes it.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful.
You know, and going back to Todd Solondz again.
So close.
Damn it. Todd Haynes' kind of interest and love for the domestic melodrama. I mean, part of what that genre does is it offers women two solutions, love or family, right? And neither one feels satisfying, and both require sacrifice. And I think we get that in this as well. There's no resolution that it's going to feel fully satisfying for this character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Todd Haynes, give Julianne Moore's character a happy ending in one of your movies, because unfortunately she doesn't get a happy ending in Far From Heaven either. I would actually argue it's not from Todd Haynes, but The Hours. She actually at least does get a happy ending in The Hours.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is pretty good because that movie is filled with unhappy endings.
Yes.
Yeah, because her son grows up gay and dies by suicide because he has AIDS.
Mhm.
Full circle moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that is safe, and I did love I loved this movie so much. I don't think I'll watch it often, but Haynes' direction, Moore's performance, like this is a fantastic film, and I hope listeners that you went out and sought this out because we were covering it, because I just think this movie does need to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I stole the first final word. Andy, final words on safe.
You know, I was trying to remember back to the review you were reading about her beef with the ending. What was it again?
It was just that. So he insists on a chilly ambiguity that breeds more detachment than interest. He makes fools of the film's new agers while possibly embracing some of their views.
That's the part. Yeah, but I think that's true. I mean, I don't understand how that's. I
don't find that a bad thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's not a weakness to me.
Because I think this is what we've known. I'm obsessed with like NXIVM cult and all of them. I've read everything about it because the cult leader mixes truth with lies, you know, and so I think that Todd Haynes does believe some of this about the power of positive thinking, or you know, we've even had scientific studies about the power of prayer working, right? And so there is some truth to this, but I think it's ultimately how these things become unsatisfying because they can't be a totalizing sort of solution. I think he doesn't know what the solution is.
Exactly.
No,
exactly.
Is there one?
But that's the thing. Like, so did critics at the time want? Oh, hey, here's what's wrong with you. Here's a solution. You have a happy ending,
right?
Or an unhappy ending. I think they felt like there just wasn't an ending. The ambiguity was too much.
But that's where we go into the AIDS metaphor, where it's like, hey, in 1995, in 2020, I mean, we have a happy ending for HIV now. It's not a cure. But it's a happier ending where people that have HIV can still live very long, happy, healthy lives. That was not the case in 1995. So I find it ironic that a lot of these straight critics are very much like, oh, this isn't really fair. As if it wasn't actually happening to all the queer community, the whole queer community at the same fucking time.
Yeah.
I know, but we got Philadelphia, and even though he dies, that made me happy because I felt like we were going to get some justice.
But that's privilege, right? It's like these privileged people that's like, oh, we deserve a happy ending for having to go through this. Well, no, because in real life, these people that really were going through this weren't having happy endings. I'm sorry. Fuck you.
Well, and the funny thing is that if you do want to disregard the AIDS metaphor piece, if you just want to look at this as like, okay, you have a chemical sensitivity, it only becomes, yes, I'm going to say it again, it only becomes more prescient as we advance. And like, honestly, we just torpedo the environment to kingdom come. Like, I don't know about you folks, but like, scent-free environments in the workplace and all these other things. It's like, this is a direct correlation to the kind of themes that he's bringing up in this film from 1995.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like if I wanted to escape capitalism, it's like
goodbye, Andy. We'll shoot you into space.
Exactly. I go become Ted Kaczynski. Like, what are my options?
You have no option. Yeah, you have to go to Alaska and live in a cabin.
Right. And so she escapes heteronormativity, right? This thing that she was allergic to. But the alternative is isolation. Right?
Yeah.
Living in a sexless cult, right? Where you deny the basic functionings of desire in your body.
And maybe still don't get any better.
But that's part of the commentary, right? Where it's like, hey, we as a society need to do better. We need to be better. We can't just ostracize these people that have a disease because it's inconvenient for us.
Right. Or it makes us feel weird. Like, oh, I don't really know how to respond to that. Go live in an igloo.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, honestly, like my 4-star rating for this film went up after this conversation.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie.
It's so good. But Joe, any final words, by the way?
No. You know what? I think we've done a good job of covering it.
All right. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Andy, first of all, thank you once again for coming to help us parse through some really dense, heavy material.
This is one I've been afraid to teach for that reason. So yeah, it's been really nice working through it with you guys.
Well, let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
Right. So Twitter, for as long as it's around, I am Andrew Scahilll. I've started doing events here in Denver where I live called Rainbow Cult, where we do interactive cinema nights in the style of Rocky Horror Picture Show. Our next one is Showgirls.
Nice.
And I've started to doing merch for it, and you can find that on cinemaforsodomites.com.
Oh.
Sodomite is my favorite anti-gay slur. So
it's a good one.
I don't ever hear that thrown around. Hey, everyone, please use sodomite more.
Yes. I think it's hilariously antiquated, and all of us are sodomites. That's why it's funny to me.
Yeah.
Legally, we're all sodomites.
Ooh. Let's have somebody, if anybody knows how to do, like, change either a GIF or, like, something like that, for Justin Long's character in Barbarian, instead of What Up Essler, do, like, What Up Sodomites.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, my logo for it is just a camera lens. So, if you see it, you see it. It's that kind of thing.
Voyeurism. And buttholes.
Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered, or go to our YouTube channel to watch us interview various filmmakers and talk to our peers about hot-button horror issues. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you want to show us some love, please rate and or review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want to show us more love via money, please go support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. This month, we've got episodes on the horror anthology sequel Scare Package 2, Red Chad's Revenge, Netflix's Edgar Allan Poe murder mystery, The Pale Blue Eye, Skinamarink, the found footage horror film that was pirated a lot last month that shouldn't have been, and Megan, the film whose trailer took the world by storm last year and will hopefully still be really, really fucking good. And we've also got an audio commentary on Cloverfield in honor of its 15th anniversary.
Yeah, the anniversary ones are tough because they remind you how fucking old you are.
Constantly. 15 years for Cloverfield. Ugh.
Right?
God. Joe.
Yes.
Oh, what are we talking about next week?
So, speaking of the female Gothic, we're going to dip our toe into Guillermo del Toro territory, talk about some Crimson Peak action.
This is a movie that I feel like a lot of people were really bummed by because they thought it was going to be a very straightforward horror film and not a Gothic romance.
Yeah, and also Jessica Chastain is a big old bisexual incesty.
And she completely owns this movie.
Oh, she's fantastic, yeah.
Until next week, then, y'all, we can cross out safe.
Indeed. And cross out horror queers.
Atlas Avenue. A long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kenneth Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.